All right, welcome everyone. Especially welcome to you, Andreas, Koefoed, who made this great film, The Last Leonardo. My name is Nadi Toferian. I'm a research fellow and lecturer in film at the Department of Media Studies at Stockholm University. So firstly, as a documentary filmmaker, you must find many fascinating stories. Like what is it that made you make a film about this story? And also if you could share, like, when did you start following a story? When did you realize you wanted to make a film? And when did you start actual shooting?
Yeah, I think we started a little more than 3 years ago. It was in the spring of 2018. And it was a few months after the sale of the painting at Christie's, the world record sale. So there was a lot of the talk about this painting in medias across the world. And then I was contacted by a producer here in Copenhagen who told me the story, because I was not aware of the story before that. And then I started to look into it, and it seemed like there were so many fascinating aspects of the story. Just the simple fact that the painting was discovered in 2005, bought for almost nothing, and then just 12 years later, it became the world's most expensive piece of art ever sold. I mean, that's mind-boggling. So I was curious to look into that process, that journey that the painting went through. And then we started reaching out to the people who had been close to the painting, because we we got that idea that the painting would be a kind of main character of the film, but that we would tell the story through the people who had had the painting in their hands, if possible. And luckily, some of the crucial characters who had been close to the painting, they were willing to share their story. To me, I have made quite a few documentary films. This is not like the usual topic for me. It's not the usual way of telling a story either. So for me, I had to invent a method in order to tell this story. I normally do films where I follow one or two characters over time and make a portrait of them, maybe going through a difficult time in their life. And get really close to them and create an intimate portrait. And with this, it seemed like there were so many characters. So how do we create this intimacy? But the restorer, Diane Modestini, she fascinated me probably the most of the characters, and I was able to get close to her, and I think her backstory touched me, that she had lost her husband, spent so much time with the painting, and she had created almost like a bubble around her and the painting, and then after the restoration, she was faced with all this criticism. Did she actually create the Da Vinci, or what happened in that studio? And then she goes on a journey to defend herself, defend the painting, protect the painting as well, and to me that was like a whole story in itself. But but what we discovered was that around this painting there are so many stories that are interesting, and in a way we could consider the painting to be a prism that we could look through and look at the world as it is today, where power interest, money interest, it seemed to almost like overrule the truth. So by following the painting, we would enter not only the art world, but also the financial world, of where art is used for speculation and so on. And also at the end, the geopolitical world, with state leaders who have an interest in owning one of these rare masterpieces for a political purpose, to rebrand a whole nation and the like. So to me, it had so many aspects that simply just fascinated me. So the challenge was more to fit all these stories into one narrative, to create a method and a way of telling the story without being lost in complexity. Yeah. So
yes, so in terms of narrative structure, so you did mention that now, but you decided to divide the film in these three parts that you mentioned, like art world, financial speculation, and global politics. Like, when did you realize, like, this is like, I want to divide it in three parts, or did you have other parts that you
yeah, but
chose
we
not to have?
didn't. The idea of the chapters came in quite late. We had the idea that we would be in different worlds, but we didn't know exactly if we could like separate them, or if they would be intertwined in the story. So the biggest challenge of them all was like the structure of the film, and we had several different researchers and script writers attached to the film, and they all contributed in different ways, but it came kind of late that we knew exactly how to focus the story and to structure it. So we spent weeks in the editing room, and a lot of frustration and so on. But at some point we managed to crack it, and it was not. It was very much thanks to some of the script writers and the whole team of also the producers who were very much involved.
Okay, so the film is largely based on interviews with like talking heads, and aesthetically in these interviews, the interviewees are always at like almost always at the center of the screen, and often in quite symmetrical backdrops as well, like quite similarly to how I have envisioned myself. Like, could you say something about like why do you create like those framings? Like, why do you choose this framing rather than
to me it's just like I want to keep it as clean and simple as possible. So I find it, I mean, now I have created a little on yeah, I like to film straight on, and I also like the effect when the protagonist look straight into the camera, into the lens, because the classical TV interview is like you look to the left or to the right of the camera, and it just creates this distance, and it's like very much a TV format, and I think if you have that straight contact to the main character, to the person who talks, then it goes straight to you, all the information, and you feel more attached, I think. Then with this film we had also the parallel to the painting itself. It also is like straight on, looking into the lens of the painter into the eyes. So there was like it made sense to like try to recreate that posture, and then the cinematographer, he tried to set the light so it resembled the Renaissance paintings. So we tried to let ourselves be inspired by Da Vinci's art or Renaissance art.
Oh, that's fascinating to hear, actually. Thanks. And in these interviews, you as a filmmaker, or your voice is sometimes visible through your questions to the interviewees. What was that planned to also include your question, or was something you realized that you needed to have during the editing process?
Yeah, it was not planned. I normally prefer not speaking at all. So it was just a few times it made sense because of the reaction from the protagonists. Then it made sense, and yeah, it was just something we tried in the editing, and it worked well. That there was some kind of voice behind the camera, but not too obvious.
You also add archival footage, and you also have some recreations of scene, or maybe not recreations, but like probably it is recreations. But why do you what do you think these recreations add to the film?
The challenge we had was that most of the story had already taken place. So we needed to get the stories from the people who had been involved, and simply it's difficult just to, as you say, it's largely based on interviews and talking heads, and I wanted to create a more cinematic feeling. At the same time, there was very little archival footage that we could get from the actual events, also because most of them took place in like private studio or something, and there were very few photographs. So we needed to do some kind of recreations, and it's always tricky to do that because you tend to be moved out of the feeling of watching something authentic when you reenact something, because it looks made up oftentimes. But with this film, we were lucky that we could actually film, for example, the restorer or the two art dealers who found the painting in their studios, looking at other paintings as a visualization of the process of working or dealing with the Salvator Mundi painting. So in that way, we didn't have the problem of like a bad actor stepping in, pretending to be the restorer or the art dealer. But then later in the story, we couldn't do the same thing. So we like focused on close-ups and like set the scenes of the different events through reenactments or recreations. And it's a very delicate balance. I hope, I mean, some people don't like recreations at all, and they think they all look fake. Some people, they forget about it when they watch it. So it's very different how it's received, but it's a very delicate balance. And luckily, the people who most of the people in the interviews, they are pretty good storytellers. So oftentimes it's also nice just to look at them and look at their faces and their expressions.
Definitely, like these close-ups adds a lot, and the expressions, and of course reenactments is a better word than recreations. Who are some of the, like in the end, you list a couple of institutions or people that you wanted to have in the film and you wanted to interview, but like to you, like what was the biggest omission? Like what character did you really want to add to the film that who said no?
We really wanted to talk to the curator from the Louvre who set up the big exhibition, and who examined the painting, and he had actually said yes to an interview, and then when the painting didn't show up, then he like stepped out of it. So it would have been very interesting to hear his take on it, but he would probably not be able to say that much because he would have like a non-disclosure agreement with the Louvre and so on, so, or the owners of the painting. So it might have been like an awkward interview, I guess. So I'm not sure it would have contributed more with the information, but you would definitely get the sense that something is being hidden.
Did you get your hold of that catalog?
Yes.
Okay. So I watched this film with a colleague, and after watching it, one of us were convinced the painting was authentically by Da Vinci, and one being convinced that it's not. So in the making of this film, like, how did you make sure to balance those two perspectives?
I mean, we talked to all the most important scholars who are experts on Da Vinci, and it seems like around half of them believes the painting to be authentic, and the other half does not. What most of them agree about is that it's painted at Da Vinci's studio, but whether it's a student or himself, that's up for discussion. I simply tried to not put forward the films or my opinion about it, because I'm not at all an expert in art, and I didn't want to impose my naive view. And I also think it's more interesting for the viewer that it's something they can make up their own mind about while watching the film. So it's something that will intrigue them while they watch it. But it's funny because when I show the film to some of the characters, they say, oh, it's so clear that you're so critical of the painting. That's what the people who believe it to be true say. Oh, we wanted to have one or two more voices like talking like for the authenticity, and yeah, and the other part they say kind of the similar thing. So it's very difficult to balance it totally. So yeah, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, based on my small sample size, you did a very good job at balancing it.
Yeah.
So finally, I think there are many filmmakers in the audience as well. Like, how does one start and end a film, a documentary film? Like, how do you decide your first and your last shot in the film?
That's a good question. I mean, it's not something I'm not the kind of filmmaker who has like a clear vision of the film I want to make and then I go out and execute it. It's a very dynamic process and also involves the editor, the producer, and so on. So you just have to try different options. We pretty quickly got the idea that the discovery of the painting in 2005 should be like the starting point of the film. But for a long time, we didn't really have any good images for it. So it was just like this art dealer, Alexander Parrish, talking about how he found it. So it was kind of dry. And then at some point we managed to get a scene with him looking through this old place with a lot of paintings and like to create that feeling of discovering a lost painting, and it helped a lot to create a more cinematic feel. And then the ending it looked like completely different just a week before we closed the editing. We had the deadline up to Tribeca, and we were really rushing, and suddenly the guys from Sony Pictures, they said, oh, the ending is now so boring. Like a month ago you had a really good ending. And then we were all like, okay, let's look at the old ending. And then we tried like to blend it in again, but I didn't really believe in it, because there was a reason for why we ended up with the boring ending. so we stressed ourselves a lot with that, and then we made it pretty much the boring ending, but with some new features. For example, the voices, when the camera goes up from Diane Modestini's studio, then all these different voices about Da Vinci and Salvator Mundi, that whole like hype or craziness on the sound part, that we added that, and that helped a lot. So yeah. But it was very difficult to end the film because the story is still ongoing, and like we were waiting for something, a new revelation, something that could like really close the story. But we also knew that it probably wouldn't come, so we had to keep it open, which is also a challenge.
That's very fascinating to hear. Thanks for sharing those processes behind the start and the end. I think let's take some questions from the audience. No, just no, but thank you so much, Andreas Koefoed, for your film, The Lost Leonardo. And I don't think I mentioned it in the beginning. This film is part of the documentary competition here at the festival, and this was also the Nordic premiere of the film. Thank you, Andreas.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. And yeah.